Okay, so the Microsoft Fabric section is about to begin. Yeah, I just want to confirm if everybody can hear me. Just leave a message on the chat. Let me know you can hear me loud and clear. If you can hear me, leave a message on the chat. Just say hi, say something so I can know you can hear me. Nice, nice, nice. Thank you, Nyola. Okay, okay. Grasshopper solution. That's good. Glad you guys can hear me. So we'll just give about, let's say 5 more minutes for others to join. The link has just been sent out. Let's just give about 5 more minutes for others to join so we can begin the session. It's going to be an interesting session. I see you, Johnson. Welcome. Dio, I see you in the chat there. Welcome. Okay, so I want to believe everyone can hear me because we're about to begin the Microsoft Fabric session. So if you can hear me, just say hi on the chat while we begin. If you have any questions, you can just drop your questions on the chat also. I'll be looking out for your questions in the chat. So, as we know, I'm always a big fan of participating in data challenges because I believe they are a great opportunity for you to be able to develop yourself as a data analyst, business analyst, or Power BI developer. And Microsoft Fabric have been the talk of town for about a year plus now, going to 2 years. Now we are looking at how do we skill up as data analysts, Power BI developer, add the Microsoft Fabric to our portfolio and see how we move from there. So basically, I also believe the fast way to learn is by doing, right? The fastest way to actually learn something is by doing it. There are a lot of materials about Microsoft Fabric out there already. There are a lot of materials. You always see a lot of materials, a lot of videos online. And also you get to watch these videos without really applying them, right? So the idea is we now get to apply what we've learned in Microsoft Fabric in creating reports for data challenges. Now, when I say data challenges, it doesn't necessarily mean that whatever report you want to create, Microsoft Fabric is only used to create reports for data challenges. No, I feel it's an avenue for you to be able to practice what you've learned in Microsoft Fabric. You create reports using Fabric. Now, as we know, Microsoft Fabric is all-in-one analytical platform that combines data engineering, data science, real-time analytics, and business intelligence built on a single foundation, one lake as unified storage. It's just a simple diagram I have in front of me. You have Data Factory, Synapse Data Engineering, Synapse Data Science, Synapse Data Warehouse, Real-Time Intelligence, Power BI, Data Activator. You have all these all unified in one platform, Microsoft Fabric, right? So there are a lot of materials, like I said, there are a lot of materials on this already. You can join the Microsoft community. The link to the OneDrive where you find all the materials, the link to everything is on the OneDrive. The link has been shared and you find everything you need to know there. You can also join the Microsoft Fabric community in Nigeria. If you're in Nigeria, you can join the community and you get to learn more about Microsoft Fabric. But what are we going to be doing today, right? We're going to be analyzing our data, which is our data challenge data for FP20 analytics using Microsoft Fabric. And what we normally do before now is quite simple. We, if it's an Excel data, we just get the data into Power BI using Power Query, the ETL to do some sort of data cleaning or data transformation, then we load the data to Power BI to begin our analysis. But for Microsoft Fabric, it's similar because we actually have Dataflow Gen2 in Microsoft Fabric that behaves. Dataflow Gen2 in Microsoft Fabric is just Power Query, online Power Query. So that is the tool we're going to be using today for our data transformation. But rather than load the data to Power BI, right, we're now going to be connecting to a semantic model we've created. So we have the data source, right? We have the data source. We're going to be performing our ETL process. We'll create a semantic model, connect to this semantic model, and create our report. Kudos to Folarunsho Ajala, is actually the one that made this presentation. So how is our architecture going to look like today? It's a very simple architecture, right? We have our data source, which is data source, the data for the challenge sitting on our OneDrive, right? Now, what we're simply going to do is use Dataflow Gen2 to ingest the data. We're going to extract the data, transform the data, prep the data, clean, and ingest the data into a Fabric Lakehouse. From the Fabric Lakehouse, we're going to create a semantic model from which we can then connect to Power BI. You can actually do everything in Power BI service, but in this case, I want us to see a situation where you can connect to your semantic model from the Power BI desktop. So quickly, for the challenge, right? you actually have the data set, you can come to fp20analytics.com. You find the data set to the challenge. Everything you need to know about the data challenge, right, is on fp20analytics.com. You find it here, fp20analytics.com, banking and customer transaction analysis, right? You find the detail about the challenge. The challenge is actually started like 28th of May and is going to end on the 16th of June. That's why I actually had to shift this session forward to give us the opportunity to be able to participate in challenge when we are done creating our report. So also, one of the sponsors of the challenge, that's Zoom Chat, you have the opportunity to create your report using Zoom Chat and stand the opportunity to win about $300 worth of Amazon voucher. So all you need to do is register for Zoom Chat, read the details there. You need to use their visuals. They have their visuals, their own visuals in the Microsoft App Store where you can actually get their visuals and create your own reports. So I'm going to come down. So this is the detail about the challenge, right? You have all the details you need to know about the challenge right here. Everything you need to know about the challenge, what it entails, what you need to do, everything is right here on the website for FP20 Analytics. You find it on the website. So there are some key questions that have been requested, right? They have some questions your stakeholders are looking to answer. They want you to answer these questions. Customer insights and segmentation, right? Transaction behavior analysis, revenue and cost insights, trend and performance analytics. So these are the things we are going to be looking at, right? When we are conducting our analysis, these are the things we're going to be looking at. And we're going to be possibly answering some of those questions. But everything we're going to be doing using Microsoft Fabric. Then if you come down, you find the judging criteria here, everything you need to know about the data challenge. And most importantly, you can download the data set, English, you download the data set and look out for the submission process, how you can submit your entry for the challenge when you're done creating your reports. You look out for how you can submit your entry for the challenge when you're done creating your reports. So what do we need to do first? Before now, I believe you should have a Power BI developer account. You need a Power BI developer account. If you have a Power BI developer account before now, it simply means we can actually just log into Microsoft Fabric or Microsoft Power BI. So app.powerbi.com, right? I already have it open actually. So the link is always app.powerbi.com. If it's a new, you can just log in. But for me, I'm already logged in. So immediately I open the app.powerbi.com or fabric.com. It will just open up Power BI service for me, and it's always going to look like this, right? It's going to look like this. For my Fabric trial, I still have 29 days left for my Microsoft Fabric trial. So this means I can use Microsoft Fabric, the features in Microsoft Fabric for free for the next 29 days, right? So once we have our Power BI service open, the first thing we need to do is to create a workspace where we want to do all our analysis, right? Where we want everything to sit, our lakehouse, warehouse, everything we need, our reports, our model, where we want everything to sit, right? We need to create a workspace. So to create a workspace is quite easy, right? I'll simply come to where I have workspaces here, right? I'll click on workspaces. I have a lot of workspace created, but in your own case, when you click on workspaces, what you need to do is just come down and say you want to create a new workspace. So in this case, I'll just select I want to create a new workspace. Of course, I need to give my workspace a name. So I'll simply give this workspace, since it's FP20 Analytics, I'll just say FP20 bank data or FP20 bank analysis in the recent. So you can actually give your workspace any name. Of course, if the name is available, you get the prompt here, this name is available. So you can put a description for your workspace, is entirely up to you. Once you're done, you can then click on apply. So this will automatically create a workspace for us, right? to create a workspace for us. So this is our workspace has been created. If you look up here, you find it FP20 bank analysis. One thing I'll quickly do is open up Power BI, right? I'll open up Power BI. So I'll give it a little time for Power BI to open. So I'll just walk us through the process, what we've been doing and what we want to do differently. Ideally, once we're in Power BI, we would go to Excel. We want to import data from Excel, right? Once we're in Power BI, I'll just select the blank report. Once we're in Power BI, we would want to always import data from Excel, right? Import data from Excel. Then, of course, to navigate to where you have the data. In this case, I have that data somewhere. I think I have it on my OneDrive, bank transactions, and click on open. Yeah, so the navigator pane is open. I can just select the banking data, which is the data itself. Then we need to click on transform data. Then in Power Query, we get to perform all our data transformation and eventually we would load the data, close and apply to load the data to Power BI, right? This is the process we do. This is what, okay, yeah, this is quite familiar with almost everyone. Yes, we know we can get data. We have a lot of data sources. You can connect to a lot of data sources with Power BI. But now what's the new trend has been Power BI is actually a visualization tool. We're not supposed to be loading our data into Power BI. That is actually the take. So what we're doing different today is we have our workspace created, right? Now we are going to create a lakehouse. A lakehouse is where our data is going to sit eventually. So to create a lakehouse, we're creating that lakehouse within our workspace. Within this workspace we created, we're creating the lakehouse within the workspace we've created. So what do we want to do? We want to create a new item, of course. So I have a lot of items I can actually create. So what I'll simply do on the filter here, I can just search for lakehouse and I'll find. Okay, so the link is going to be shared. I'm sure it has been shared before. It will also be shared where you find everything, the materials, everything. You find everything in the link that will be shared. The link to the OneDrive, it will be shared, so you find everything there. You don't need to worry. So um, network. So I believe we're creating a lake house. I'll just refresh this to make sure we're good. Okay. So I'll go over that again. I want to create a new item and I'll search for Lakehouse. I want to create a Lakehouse. You can see store big data for cleaning, querying, reporting, and sharing. So I'll select the Lakehouse. Yes, so now we have to give our Lakehouse a name. We have to give our Lakehouse a name. So I will just call this bank. So I already have bank transaction Lakehouse. So I would just say transaction lakehouse this time around. Maybe I'll just say transactions lakehouse. Transactions LK. Once I'm done giving my lakehouse a name, I'll click on create. So now we have created a lakehouse that is going to house our data, is going to store our data. The next question is, how do we get our data from where our data is currently sitting, which is the OneDrive in my um, desktop, to the Lakehouse? Remember, we just can't get the data from the OneDrive directly to the Lakehouse. We have to then use the Dataflow Gen2. And like I said, Dataflow Gen2 is simply Power Query, online Power Query. You're familiar with Power Query for Power BI or Power Query for Excel. So Dataflow Gen2 is simply online and Power Query. So our Lakehouse is loading. We'll give it a little time for the Lakehouse to actually complete the process, create the Lakehouse. taking a little while. So okay, it's not supposed to take this long. I believe it's my network or something. It's not supposed to take this long. Okay, so our Lakehouse is created already. Now you can see the prompt we have here, get data into your get data in your Lakehouse. So you have a lot of ways you can actually get data into your Lakehouse. You can upload files, right? You can start with the sample data already here. You can create a new shortcut, a new Dataflow Gen2, new data pipeline. You have a lot of variety of options, just like you have options to get data into Power BI, right? This is your Lakehouse now. You have a lot of options to actually get data into your Lakehouse. So, like I said, what we're going to be using is Dataflow Gen2. Now, you can see here, prep, clean, transform, and ingest data. So we can actually do that using Dataflow Gen2. So I'll simply select Dataflow Gen2. Or I'll come up here and say Dataflow Gen2. Okay, I'm not getting any response. I'll just refresh this quickly. Then get data, Dataflow Gen2. Okay, so I'll just refresh this again. We're currently still in our Lakehouse, right? Transactions, LK, that's our Lakehouse. I'm not getting any response. Okay, so get data, new data flow Gen2. Now we need to then give our data flow a name. What is going to be the name of our data flow? So I'll simply call this transactions transactions DF. I'll simply call this transactions DF, and of course I'll create. So this will create our data flow, right? Now, once the data flow opens up, you are going to see that the data flow is actually similar to what we see in Power Query. The Power Query and Dataflow Gen2, the interface is actually similar. So it's going to be a familiar interface for you. So let's give it a little time to open up. I'll just refresh this again to be sure. Okay. Okay, so now you can actually see Power Query, right? Power Query, that's what you're going to see up here, Power Query. So we've opened up our Dataflow Gen2 and that brought us to Power Query. Now, the question is, we have a lot of options to actually get data into Power Query right now, into Dataflow Gen2 using, we have a lot of options. We can import data from Excel just the way we have it in Power BI, right? When we're importing data from Power BI from Power Query to Power BI, we can import data from SQL, import the text, or import flows, import from data flows, right? Now, in this case, we have our data sitting in a OneDrive. It's an Excel file sitting in a OneDrive in my system. So in your own case, to be sitting in a OneDrive in your own system. So what do I want to do? I simply want to import data from Excel, right? Of course, you also can come here and get data from Excel workbook. Now, I need to connect to that Excel workbook, right? I need to connect to that Excel workbook. So link, so I can browse OneDrive storage. I'll simply browse, give it time. Then, of course, this will open up my OneDrive, right? I know the data is sitting on bank transactions, right? So I'll simply open it up and select transactions. That's transactions. Then I'll click on select. Remember, I said there's a link to a OneDrive that has been shared already. You find everything. You find the data there also. You find the data there, so you can actually just download the data, take it to your OneDrive. So of course, I'll click on next, right? I'll click on next to connect to the data source. Now, this is like the navigator pane, right? We have the banking data, then we have the data dictionary. In this case, I don't need the dictionary. The data dictionary is just about the data set, right? So this case, I don't need it. So I'll just select the banking data. Once I select the banking data, of course, you see the sample. Then I'll click on create. I'll click on create. This will bring the banking data, right? Will bring the banking data to Power Query for us. So now that we have the banking data in Power Query, right, we can then also perform our data transformation. If we need to do any form of data modeling, we can actually do it while we're here, and when we're done, we can then load the data to our Lakehouse. So unlike the old process, I won't call it old process, it's still a process we use. Unlike loading the data to Power BI, this time around we're loading the data to the Lakehouse we created, right? So let's do some form of transformation for this data. So the data I have here is quite different from what, if you happen to download the data for the data challenge, what I have currently, data I have is quite different from what they shared in the data challenge. They are similar actually, but there are just some few changes I made to my own data, right? I made some changes to my own data, and those changes will only reflect in my data. So if you download the data set for the challenge, you're not going to find these changes I made in my own data in that very data set. So while we're here, we are going to be making some data transformation, right? So we have the banking data, transaction ID, customer ID, the date of the transaction, transaction type, and all. We have lots of column, right? So you can go through every column we have in the data. Like I said, this data is quite different from what was shared for the data challenge. It's similar, right? For the data challenge, you're not restricted actually. You're always encouraged to add some fields to make your analysis more robust and to drive more insight. So there are some fields are added you're naturally not going to see when you download the data set for the challenge. Okay, so there are some few transformations I'm going to be doing here, right? Quickly. One of the transformation is um, on this table, the banking transaction table, I can actually see that I have branch city, right? I also have the latitude and the longitude. This, I've been able to identify these entities, right? An entity location, and the attribute of the entity for location is going to be the branch city, latitude, and longitude. So I'm looking at my data modeling and I'm saying, okay, I have an entity called location for my data model, and the attribute of my location will be the city, the latitude, and the longitude. So what I'm quickly going to do, I'm going to right click on this banking, and I'm just going to make a duplicate of the data. So I'm going to call this very duplicate that was made now, I'm going to call this dim dimension. We've done this before in Power Query, right? So I'll just say this is my dim um, dim locations, actually, not dimension. That's dimension locations, right? So this is going to be my dim locations. So for my dim locations, what I need to just do is come to home, choose column, choose columns. I don't need all this entire column. What I need is just the branch city, the latitude, and the longitude, right? Once I'm done, I'll click on OK. So yes, I know the branch city is actually unique because we have just one city. So automatically this can actually be my primary key for this table. So what I'm quickly going to do, I'll right click on the branch city and I'll simply remove duplicates. So I have unique city. Immediately I remove duplicates, you are going to notice a key here. This is simply trying to say this is going to be the primary key for this table. But one thing I'll also do, I'll just come to add column here and I'll add an index column. I'll say from 1, right? Then what I'm going to do next is just bring this index column, make it the first column, right? I'll make it the first column. I'll rename this index column now. Just double click on it, rename it to city ID. Okay, so I've created a dimension locations table, right, from my main table. Also, I identified another entity which is product, because I can actually see product category, that's product category and product subcategory. I know there's no product name, but one thing I quickly needed to do was, so when I created a duplicate, right? And I'll simply call this duplicate dimension products, right? So this is going to be dim products. I know I have just two attributes for products, which is the category and the subcategory. That's fine. What I'm going to do next is simply come to home. I'll choose column, choose columns. I want to check everything, simply select product category and product subcategory and click OK. Now, it's going to be a struggle for you to identify the primary key you're going to use, right? Because you can actually use category. If you do that, you're going to find out that you're going to be losing some subcategories. So what I basically did was right click on the product category. I said I want a duplicate of this column. I also did the same thing for subcategory product, right click. I said I want a duplicate of this column also. The next thing I did was for the duplicate, I combined the two of them together. That's the product category and the subcategory. Right click and merge these two columns together. I simply call these two columns product name, right? Then of course I didn't put a separator. Then I clicked on OK. So now I have a unique key, right? Which is more like my product name. I also add an index column that will actually be my product ID. So what I can do now is right click on this product name I've created and also remove duplicate. So I'll have unique product, right? So in the end, you can actually see that I have 24 products, right? This is credit card, this is credit card gold, right? Under the product category, credit card, subcategory gold. So I have unique product name. That's why I have the key up here. So if I'm going to add a column, index column, I'm just going to say custom and I'm going to say 101 and I'll just increment by 1 and click on OK. So this will create an index column for me. I'll just bring the index column, make it my first column, right? And I'll simply rename this to product ID. Since I also want this to be my primary key, right? I'll simply come to home and okay, yeah, I'll come to transform and I'll simply say mark as key. That's the product ID. It's going to mark the product ID as key. So this is also key and this is also key. So I come to my dim locations again. The city ID I'll also mark as key. So we have two dimensions we've created, right? Locations and products. Let's go back to our banking data. Another dimension I wanted to create was for customers, right? Customers. So I found out that we have the customer ID, right? Then if you scroll, you are going to also find out that we have the customer score, the monthly income, the customer segment, also the customer status. So we have a lot of attributes for the customer, which simply means we can actually create a customer table. We can create a dimension customers table. So I'll simply right click on this and I'll make a duplicate again. Next, I'm simply going to come to home. Then I'm going to say I want to choose columns, right? I simply want to choose columns. I'll select it, unselect everything and select only the attributes for customer, which is the customer ID. Next, I know the customer, we have the credit score, we have the monthly income, the segments, and the status. These are the attributes of the customer. So I'm not just selecting anything at all. I'm selecting the attributes of the customer entity. We've identified the customer as an entity. Next, I'm selecting the attribute of the customer, right? So once I'm done selecting the attribute of the customer, the next thing I'll quickly do, I'll simply click on OK. Now, one thing I noticed about the data, right? Of course, on our banking data, a customer can perform multiple transactions, right? But I also noticed that we have customers. I also noticed that we have customers with multiple, what will I call it? Multiple status. Yes, it's expected that a customer can proceed from one status to another, right? A customer was once an old customer, then of course, they change status to be a new customer. First, you will be a new customer, then you proceed to be an old customer, right? But we don't have much about the data in that regard, right? So if, for example, I come to customer ID here and I filter by a particular customer and click on OK, you simply find out that this customer, right? The customer is having customer score 543, 346, 777, 372, 555, then different monthly income, right? But what I simply want to do, I decided to make it very easy and simple, right? I'm going to discredit the customer segment I have here. I'm also going to discredit the monthly income, right? I'm just going to pick one because immediately I remove duplicate from here, it simply means I'm only going to be able to pick one data for this customer, right? So this is where we can talk about stuff like slowly changing dimension and all that, but we're not going to be going deep into that. So what I'm simply going to do is just clear filters, right? Once I clear filters, I'm just going to right click on these customers and I'm going to remove duplicates, right? I'm going to remove duplicates. So for the customer, this customer, I'm going to work with this customer score, right? And I'm going to work with this monthly income. So what I'm going to do next, I'm also going to then go ahead to create another customer segment. I'm going to discard this. I'm going to create another customer segment of my own, right? Using the current income of the customer, right? Yes, it tallies for now, but there are some situations it won't really tally. So to be sure and to make sure that I have everything covered, so I'm just going to create a new customer segment. And to do that is quite easy. I'm just going to say I want to add column, and this time around I want to add a conditional column. So I'll simply say I won't give the column a name now. Of course, I know it's customer segment. So what I simply want to say is the monthly income, if it's less than or equal to let's see, if it's less than or equal to 499, right? I simply want to say this is a low, the customer belongs to a low income segment. Then, of course, I'll add another clause if the monthly income is less than or equal to, so this is going to be 699, right? I'll say the customer belongs to the middle income segment. Then, of course, if it doesn't belong to any of those two, the customer is definitely a high, belongs to the high income segment, right? So I'll click on OK. Okay, so now that I have the new column created for me, I have the new column created for me already, right? I'll change the data type for this new column that has been created to text. I'll change the data type to text. Okay, so I'll discard this very one, right? This one I have here, I'm going to discard this. But before I leave the dimension customer, so I'm going to rename this to dim customers, right? Before I leave the dimension customers, I also want to create a segment for the score, for the customer score. I want to create a segment for the customer score. So which simply means I also want to create another conditional column. So I'll create another conditional column. This will simply be score segment, right? And I simply want to say if the customer score is less than or equal to 499, I'll simply say this is poor. Then I'll add another clause if the score is less than or equal to what's okay. This is 499 actually, not 999. We're looking at the score. So next I'll say if it's less than or equal to what bucket should we use now? Should we say 5? Okay, say 599, right? This is 599, not 999. So I'll say this is fair. Then of course I'll add another clause if the score is less than or equal to 699. I'll say this is good. Then finally, of course, if it's greater than 700, then we'll say it's excellent. Ideally, you can actually, it's up to you, right? I can decide to say this should be 699, right? I can decide to say this should be, okay, I'll leave it just the way we have it before now. That's 599, then this should be 699, right? Then, of course, if it's not any of these, it should be excellent. Then I'll click on OK. So this will then create an extra column, right? A new column, the score segment, right? The customer belongs to. So we have the score segment, the customer belongs to. I'll do well to change the data type also to make it text, right? I'll make the data type a text. So I don't forget, I'll simply come to home now and say I want to choose column, right? And for this, I want to remove the current customer segment I have and click on OK. I'll just remove it and click on OK. Once I'm done, I'll rename this custom segment. I'll simply say this should be my, I'll call this new, sorry, I'll say new customer segments. So I have a new customer segment. Okay, so with this, I believe we're done with the dimension customers, right? We're done with the dimension customers. So let's quickly go back to our data, right? And see if there's any other entity we can identify within the data. If there's any other entity we can identify within the data. So we have the transactions, the customer. So the data modeling in this case is entirely up to you, right? You determine what you actually want to do. For me, I just wanted to work with locations, products, and customers. That's just my focus in this case. So once I'm done with that, it simply means on this table, right, there are some things I don't need anymore. There are some columns I don't need anymore because I already have them on my dimensions. So one thing I'll quickly do also is to come to the products. Remember, for the product ID, we had to merge category and the subcategory to give us a unique ID. So I'll simply do that while on the banking data. I'll stop this, come to view, and uncheck column profile. So I'll select the product category, select the subcategory, right click, and merge these two columns together. I simply want to merge, so why can't I find merge here? So let me scroll down, transform, merge column. So I'll also call this column product name, right? Just like we have it on our dimension product table. So I'll call it product name. Okay, so now we have the product name, right? We have the product name here also. So next, I'm going to rename this table. Instead of banking data, I'll just call it my FACT, that's my fact transactions, right? So this is going to be my fact transactions. So this is going to be my fact transactions table. Okay, so What do we need to do next? Okay, so quickly, since I have my locations, my dim locations, I have the ID for my product, the ID, and for my customers, I have the ID. For my customers ID, I already have it on my transactions table, right? So, but for the location and the product, I don't have it here. I only have the product name, which can also be my ID. But I just want to make it unique, right? So what I'll simply do next is come to home and say I want to merge, right? So combine in this case, and I want to merge queries, right? What do I want to merge? I want to merge products. So what am I using? I'm actually using the product name on both sides, product name. So yeah, left outer is fine. I'll just click on OK. So of course, now I need to expand my table. I'll expand this table. The only thing I actually need is just the product ID. So I'll pick the product ID and click on OK. So once I'm done doing that, I'll do the same thing for the locations, right? So I'll go back again. I want to combine. I want to merge. Then of course this time around I'm doing this for locations. And it's going to be city. That's the branch city, branch city. Left outer is also fine. We can actually use inner join also. So I'll click on OK. Then of course I'm going to expand my table, and I'm just going to check the city ID and click on OK. So I have the city ID, I have the product ID, I have the customer ID all in my transactions table. So for my transaction one last time, I'm just going to come to choose column, choose column. What I need to do is uncheck the product name, uncheck the branch city, latitude, longitude. I'll scroll down. I'll also uncheck the customer score, the monthly income, the customer segment, the customer status. Be careful when you're unchecking. What else? I won't uncheck product ID because I need product ID. It's a foreign key here. I need it to connect to my product table. City ID, I also need it to connect to my locations table. So I think that's all. I'll uncheck every other thing. I think that's all I need to uncheck here. Then I'll click on OK. Great. So I have my tables, I have everything right here. And those are the dimensions I was able to identify and what I want to work with. So what's the next thing I'm going to do? I need a calendar table also. Remember, unlike we can actually create a calendar table in Power Query, right? If it's Power Query in Power BI, right? In desktop, we can actually create a calendar table. And we can also create a calendar table in Power BI. But we won't be able to create any table in Power BI once we connect to our semantic model. Once we connect to our Power BI semantic model, we won't be able to create any table. So by the time you connect to your semantic model using Power BI desktop in this case, remember I said also you can actually do everything in Fabric here, but we're going to be connecting to the model from our desktop. So once we connect to the desktop, connect to the semantic model from our Power BI desktop, we won't be able to create any table. You won't even have table view. So you're going to see that quickly. So for that reason, I'm not going to go ahead to create my calendar table here also. So what do I want to do? I want to simply create a calendar table. Meanwhile, on my transactions table, I have transactions date, right? So I'll select this transaction date and time. Actually, I'll change the data type to just date, transaction date. I only actually want transaction date. I don't need the time because the time is actually same for everything. So I'll select the transaction date. Next, I want to then create a calendar table, right? So for the calendar table, remember the link to the OneDrive has been shared already, right? On the link to the OneDrive, you are going to find a file that says mquery to create calendar table, because I'm not going to be writing the query. The query has already been written. What I need to do is just go copy the query and paste it here to create a calendar table. That's what I'm simply going to do. Now, I've shared the query with you. Once you go to the OneDrive, you'll be able to find the file there. Everything I'm going to be using, you're going to find it there, and you should be able to just replicate it, right? That query was actually created by Federico Pastor. I got hold of it some time ago. So what I want to simply do, right? I only made a modification to the query that once my date, right? Once a new data set comes in here, and as the date is increasing, it should dynamically work with the date, my transaction date, rather than manually setting it, right, to a particular date range. No, it's going to be dynamically changing. So the first thing I need to do, right, is access that code. So I have it somewhere in my computer. I have my files, I have my DAX formulas, I have date query and year-on-year DAX. So I'll just open that up. So like I said, you have this already. I sent it across, right? So while in our Power Query, that's our data flow, I'll simply right click and say I want to create a new query and I want to create a blank query, right? So now I'm expected to paste the code. Now, like I said, the code has been shared, so I'll delete this. I'll simply go to the file. So when you're copying this code, please be careful. I have three codes here to be clear. One is part one. This is the first part. Watch carefully. I'm going to highlight everything, select everything till I get to part two. So this is part two, but I only need to select for part one. So I'm not going to select part two. So I'm just going to highlight everything here and I'm going to copy, right? I'm just going to copy, then navigate back and paste the code. That's all you need to do. Copy and paste. Once you're done doing that, click on next. So once you click on next, now there's a prompt. You're going to get a prompt. Ideally, you can just select a date range here, right? Start date, end date, and the calendar table will be created. But like I said, I want a situation where the calendar, right? The date, my calendar table increases or expands as my transaction dates expand, right? So dynamically. So I need to go back again and copy another query. So I'm just going to rename this. So when you go back to the file, like I said, you have part one, we've copied part one. So part two is what we have here. This is just a modification I made to the query, right? To dynamically create my calendar, right? So, but be careful. Now, look at what we have here, banking data. That is actually the source is referring to. Because like I said, we want the dates from our data. So as our transactions are increasing, as the dates are increasing, our calendar table is going to be increasing according to the dates in our calendar, in our transaction. So the minimum date in our transaction, the maximum date, that's what our calendar table range is going to be created with. So now, remember, this source is banking data. That's because when we did this, it was banking data. So now that I'm going to copy this, right, there are possible errors you're going to run into. I love to walk through the errors, so just in case you have those errors, right? So I'll come back here, right? I'll right click and say I want to create a new query, a blank query. I'll simply delete everything I have here and I'll paste that code. Now, if I go ahead and click on next, let's see what happens. Now I'm going to get errors, right? I won't be able to do what I want. That's because, like I said, um, for we didn't do the modifications we're supposed to do because we don't actually have banking data anymore. What we have is fact transactions. So I'll just delete that. I'll right click again and say new query, blank query. So I'll delete everything and I'll paste it. Now what I need to do, this is no longer banking data, rather this is fact transactions, right? So I'm just going to rename this to fact transactions, right? Okay, so the row we are looking at is also the transaction date. The date is still intact, right? The mean date, the max date. But then our calendar, which is what the first query we created is actually FX calendar. So we had to go back and rename that query to the FX calendar. If we don't do that, that means we have to modify this FX calendar here to be query. So even if I do this now, what I'll do is I'll just copy this, right? And I'll click on next. I'm possibly still going to get an error. Let's give it time. So I'm still going to get an error. That's because the FX calendar doesn't match, right? So if I copy this FX calendar, let's see what happened. And I rename this, right? I rename, right? Remember, we're using this is the FX calendar we've created, right? Now, this is the start and end date. So if I rename this to FX calendar, let's see what happens down here. So our calendar table automatically will be created. I don't expect any error this time around. So our calendar table has been created. Now for this calendar table that has been created, there are a lot of fields, both the one you need, the one you don't need. That's because I think the person that created this calendar table is actually a financial person, because the columns I'm actually seeing year offset, completed, quarter of year, start of quarter, and all that. So I didn't bother altering the query because I can actually just work with the columns I want to work with and discard some of the columns I don't need, right? I can just do that. So I didn't alter the code at all. So don't stress yourself altering the code. So we have our calendar dimension created already. So I'll rename this to dim calendar, right? I'll just rename this to dim calendar. Okay, so I believe that's all the tables we need. So one thing I'll quickly do, I still want to organize everything here. I'll right click on this and I'll simply say move to a new group, and I'll call this group dimension tables, and I'll click on OK. So I'll move on my dimension table there. That's products, that's customers. Okay, so for my transaction, my fact transaction, I'll simply just right click, I'll say move to a new group, and I'll just say this is fact table. It can be tables actually, because what happens if you have more than one fact table? It's possible, I think. So for this calendar table, I'm just going to move it to its own group, right? I'll move to a new group, and I'll just say this is calendar table. Of course, you can add a description if you want to. So for the calendar table, I'm going to move the FX there. That's the FX calendar. I'm going to move the both files there. So I have it in my calendar. So now I have a structure, right? So I want my facts to come first. So I have my fact table, I have my dimension, and my calendar table. So these are the tables I want to work with. Also, I know I'm going to be creating measures, and what I love to do is to create measures, right? And have a table for just my measures, a table to hold just my measures. I don't want to be writing my measures in my data table. So I'll just click on enter data here, and I'll just say this is dim measures, right? Dim measures. I don't want to have any column, so I'll just, for the first column, I'll just say measures, right? And click on OK. So this will also create a table with just one column called measures. So this is going to be my table where I'm going to write all my measures, right? Where's the table? Table has no row. Of course I know. What if I don't need row? Okay, so I have my measures table here. So I'm going to move it from here. I'm going to move it to the dimensions table, and leave it there. Or I can move it to its own group, but I don't want to do that. So this is fine. We have everything we need. Remember our fact transactions. So remember to always check your data type. Make sure everything is in order, right? Make sure everything is in order when it comes to your data type, right? And okay, check the data type for your dimension tables also. Check everything. Once we have everything done, right? Now we have all our tables. We've performed our transformation, everything we've done using Dataflow Gen2, using Power Query. Now, where do we need to take these tables to? Remember, if we've done this before in Power BI, once we're done creating our tables and doing our modeling and everything, we just click on close and apply, right? And it loads the data to Power BI. But this time around, we are taking everything here, all the tables we have here, to the lakehouse we created initially. So now you can see default destination up here, right? You can add, or you can come to your right hand corner here, data destination. So on the right hand corner here, right? Ideally, when I created this before, it automatically just connected to my lakehouse. it assumed the destination I wanted to connect to was my Lakehouse, and it did. All the tables moved automatically. But let's do this step by step. So now we're actually selecting our fact transactions table, and we want to add a destination, right? So you can see we have different destination. You can add it to the Lakehouse warehouse SQL database, but of course, we want to add it to our Lakehouse. It's a Lakehouse we created, so we select a Lakehouse. So once we do that, next, of course, our Lakehouse is selected. Then we click on next. So this is going to open up all the workspaces. Then we need to look for the workspace where we have that Lakehouse, right? What's the name of the workspace again? I think it's actually FP20 bank analysis. Yes, FP20 bank analysis. I will expand. Then our lakehouse is actually transactions lakehouse. So I'll select the transactions lakehouse. Now you can look at the table. A new table will be created in transactions lakehouse, which means a table will be created in the transactions lakehouse called fact transactions. So when I click on next, now, using automatic settings, right? This is more like mapping your data type. If you've worked with trying to get data into SQL, right? SQL, you sometimes have to do this kind of mapping. You must have seen something like this where you do this kind of mapping. But I'm not going to use automatic settings. I'm just going to disable it, and I'm going to make sure that all my data types are intact, right? I'm sure they are intact, right? So this is where it becomes a little bit tricky, because while I was working over this, something actually happened, right? Now, you have the update method, either append or replace. We're going to be using replace. And then we have the schema option on publish. Is it dynamic schema or fixed schema? Dynamic schema simply means, let's say we have how many number of columns here. The number of columns we have here simply means these columns are going to be changing. Let's say today we have 15 columns in our transaction. Tomorrow we're going to be having 17 columns, right? It's dynamic, it's not fixed, right? Then of course you have the fixed schema, which simply means the number of columns you're seeing here is going to remain the same. It's not going to change at any point in time. Now, if you attended the World Fabric Day in Lagos, of course, when we walked around this, we actually used the fixed schema, because there are some reasons why the dynamic schema should not be used. But something actually happened while I was working over this, right? I was done creating everything, right? I was done creating everything I needed to do. Then I remembered that I needed to add an extra column, which I actually added to the raw data. Now, when I went over the whole process to refresh, I discovered that I was unable to add that column to the table I have in my Lakehouse, because I was using a fixed schema, which simply meant that that extra column I added, even though I was seeing that column in my Dataflow Gen2 in Power Query, I couldn't find that column in my Lakehouse data, which is the table in my Lakehouse, because I was using a fixed schema. So just you can read more about that. So we select a fixed schema. Of course, we want to replace, and we click on save settings, right? So this automatically creates the fact transaction table in our Lakehouse. So we succeeded in moving the fact transaction table to our Lakehouse. So if you look at the fact transaction table now, and you look at data destination, you find out that we have the Lakehouse. So we need to move all the dimension tables also, right? If you select the dimension table, which is locations, you see that there's no destination. So we need to move these tables, take all of them to the Lakehouse. So we'll just go do the same thing we've done before. I don't know if there's a process to just move all the tables at once. It actually, when I created this, that was what happened, but let's just move them one after the other. Next, bank, the workspace we actually created was FP20 bank analysis. So select the Lakehouse again, click on next. Of course, this table, I'm not going to use automatic, fixed schema, replace, click on save settings. So once we have the dimension transactions there, locations there, next for the product, I'll also add, we're moving the products to the Lakehouse also, next. Then of course, bank, FP20 bank analysis. Come on, come on, come on. Transactions, the Lakehouse. Then I also want to disable fixed schema. Yeah, okay, save settings. Move the customers. also. Next. Then of course FP20 transactions. Next. Disable, replace fixed. Some column names are unsupported. Should we fix this for you? What is that? Let's check score segments. Okay, so let me just cancel, go back to my score segment and see what's happening there. So for my customer, I have the score segment. What's happening to the score segment? Let me load more. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the score segment. Data type is actually text, right? So new customer, customer status. Okay, I think everything is fine. Let's do that again. Lakehouse. So you must be sure of the workspace and the lakehouse, right? The workspace actually, because you have the lakehouse in that workspace, so you don't go select another workspace. So I disable this. I'll just scroll down. Let me see, fix it. Okay, so that has been fixed. Okay, so I have something. Let me cancel. I think I have score segment. There's an underscore in front of the score segment, or what is happening there? Okay, there's no underscore. So what's the issue? Let me just say score category. I don't think this makes any difference, but let's see what happens. I'm just surprised. So I'll click on next. So I'll go to FP20 bank analysis again. Then of course I want to select my lakehouse. That's my transaction lakehouse and click on next. Of course I would not use. So I think everything is fine now. Fix schema, replace, save settings, right? Then we have, okay, we also have two more tables. Yes, I'm also going to move the measures table because I want the measures table in my lakehouse too. So, but definitely, so FP20, remember to be sure of your workspace. And so this is, okay, this is always going to be fixed. So once we have all the tables, right, then finally we need to move our calendar table, right? Lakehouse. So out, finally, this is our last table. There should be a way for you to move all your tables at once, because I can imagine if you have 10 tables or 20 tables, are you going to do this over and over? So we can actually research on that. So I'm just going to say save settings. So we have all our tables, right? We have all our tables. So we have all our tables, right? So once we have everything done, all we need to do is save and run this data flow. Save and run. So save and run this data flow. Give it time. Saving data flow. When it's done saving, it will run the data flow. Okay, so once we're done, I then need to come back to, this is actually our workspace, right? This is our workspace. You select our workspace. Down here, you find our data flow. Then you actually find our transaction lakehouse. So I'll actually just click on the lakehouse. So this is the lakehouse actually. So we have the lakehouse here, transactions lakehouse. So loading your lakehouse. We're expected, when we expand our tables, the tables we actually have, let's refresh our lakehouse. We should see those tables in our lakehouse now. I hope our data flow ran successfully. So if it was successful, we should find those tables in our Lakehouse. So I'll just keep refreshing. I'll refresh to make sure. I'll just right click, refresh again. Okay, so let's just go back to our data flow to be sure. I'll save and run this again to be sure it runs. We should have our data in our lakehouse now. Okay, then I'll simply go back to our lakehouse. I'll refresh the lakehouse itself. Now we have our tables, right? We have all our tables, right? The calendar table, you're going to see the preview, the customers, the locations, the measures, the product, the fact transactions. We have all our tables in the lakehouse. Remember, when you create a lakehouse, there's also an SQL endpoint that is always created for you also. So we're currently in the Lakehouse. If you want to go to the SQL endpoint, of course, you need to click on the drop down and see SQL endpoint. But we're not working with that now. We're just looking at a preview of our data we have in our Lakehouse. So this is our calendar table. Let's just look at the transactions table, right? So this is our transactions table, a preview of our transactions table. So now that we have all these tables in our Lakehouse, what do we then need to do? So what we want to do next is to create a model. Just like we create our model in Power BI, we're going to create a Power BI semantic model here. When we're done creating the semantic model, remember also you can actually create your report here also. But for this class, we're going to be opening Power BI desktop will connect to the semantic model. So since we are sure we have all our tables here, up here, I'll just say I want to create a new semantic model. So I'll click on new semantic model. Of course, it's going to be first in the schema. So all the tables I have that I want to create my semantic model with. So what's the name of our semantic model? So I'll simply say this should be transactions SM, right? Okay, transactions SM. Then, of course, it's actually bank analysis. I'm supposed to see all the tables here, so I'm just going to refresh that again. So we have all the tables now, right? I'm going to give the model a name again, transactions SM, that's transaction semantic model. So this is where you get to choose all the tables you want to be involved in your model. In this case, I'll just select all the tables. So you can just say select all, right? Once I click on select all, I'll then click on confirm. So we just have to wait a while. Like I said, you can actually use this data and the modifications that have been done for the challenge, right? You have that power to do that. It's a challenge. It's a they've given you a data set. You can make modifications to it, right? The most important thing is your analysis, right? That's the most important thing, not just participating in challenge. Your analysis, how you approached your analysis and everything you did, that's what is really important. So now that in our model view, you can see we have our tables here. So we're simply just going to create our star schema from here. First, I would make sure I have all my tables. So this is our transactions table, right? Then, of course, this measures table is not going to be connected to anything, so we'll just keep it by the side. So we have our transactions table, we have our calendar table, we have our locations, and we have our products. So quickly, I'm just going to do the connection by taking the customer ID. Where's our customers table? Okay, so this is our customers table. Customer ID to customer ID. We create a one-to-many relationship, right? So of course, many to one relationship, single direction. So click on save. That automatically does that for our customers. We also need to do the same thing for city ID. We'll save this also. Then we need to do same for the product ID. We'll also save this one to many, many to one. Then for the calendar, it's going to be the date on the calendar against the transaction date also. So we'll also do that and click on save. So now we have a very simple star schema, right? We have a simple star schema with our fact transaction at the middle. We have the locations, the product, customers, and the calendar table. So now that we have our semantic model created already, we can then connect to this semantic model from Power BI, right? You can actually create your report here. There's Power BI where you can create your report, right? But I don't want to do that. I don't want to create the reports here. So what do we have right now? We have our workspace, right? This is our workspace where we created our lakehouse, right? When we're done creating our lakehouse, we needed to then ingest data into the lakehouse using the new Dataflow Gen2. Then that's actually Power Query, online Power Query, right? Then we performed our transformation, prep our data, cleaned our data, we ingested the data into the lakehouse. Now when we're done doing that, right, our workspace, we created our lakehouse. When we're done ingesting the data into our lakehouse, right, we created our workspace, created a lakehouse. We then created the data flow, right, to ingest the data into the lakehouse. Once we're done ingesting data into the lakehouse, we created a semantic model from the data in the lakehouse, which is the result of this star schema. So when you come to our workspace now, you find out that we have the data flow, right? We have the lakehouse, then we have the semantic model for the lakehouse, then we have the transactions lakehouse, then of course we have the semantic model down here. This is the SQL endpoint actually. You can actually see it here, the SQL endpoint. So once all this is done, what do you need to do next? Is simply open up Power BI. So I know I have Power BI open already, right? So this is Power BI, but I have the banking data here. So I'm just going to discard that. I'll come to transform data. I'm going to discard this, right? I'll just delete this. So for us not to get confused, I'll close this, right? I'll just close it. I'll open a new Power BI. Discard changes. Say apply changes. So this is a new Power BI in the recent. Nothing is here. We don't have any data here. Look at it. You haven't loaded any data yet. So what do we want to do? We want to get data into our Power BI desktop. Remember, we don't have any data. So I'll simply say I want to get data now, but I want to get data from a Power BI semantic model. So I'll click on Power BI semantic model. Once I click on Power BI semantic model, you can actually find that I now have the transactions SM, which is the transactions semantic model. Transactions SM. I have the transaction semantic model. That is the semantic model we want to connect to. So once I click on it and I click on connect, now I'm expecting an error, right? I hope I get the error so I'll be able to explain to you just in case you have that error on your own end. Okay. Ah, so it's connected, right? Now you can actually see the tables here. But just in case you're trying to connect, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to close this Power BI because I don't want a situation where you're trying to create yours and you get an error. So I'm going to open up a new Power BI again, right? I was actually expecting an error. I didn't get that error. I want to actually get that error so I can actually show you how to resolve it. So I'll open up a new Power BI again and we'll try again. Also to note, remember the Power BI that I have open, I'm actually signed in to the Power BI. So up here, you can actually find that I'm actually signed in. So I'll click on blank reports. So the account I'm using here, the account I'm signed in with is the same account I'm using for my Power BI service. But That's why I probably didn't get that error, but I tried it before and I also got the error, so I just want to be sure. So if I get data again from semantic models, and let's select that semantic model again, that's transaction SM, and click on connect. Okay, I still don't get the error. If I was going to get the error, I would have gotten it by now. So it's connected without any issues. But in case you have an error that says the semantic model has been deleted, or you can't connect to the semantic model, or the semantic model has been moved, or it doesn't exist, note, in case you get any of that error, all you need to do is your um, come back to your workspace, right? When you're in your workspace, we go to the semantic model, right? Ideally, you then need to share the semantic model. So for example, I have somebody's account, maybe somebody in the um, group here. Somebody in the group here drops his or her account for me. I can actually, of course, there has to be some level of security because I have to share the workspace with you, right? First, then I'll be able to share the semantic model with you also. So if you have that issue and it says that you can't connect to the semantic model, or it has been moved, or one thing or the other has happened to the semantic model, all you need to do is simply say you want to share the semantic model. So when you click on share semantic model, you can find the different so allow recipient to modify this data set, allow recipients to share this semantic model, allow recipient to build content with the, data associated with this semantic model. It's up to you to determine the access you want to give to that recipient. Of course, the email address, right? So I'm using the same account. So if I select, so this is my account that I'm actually using. So I'll select, I'll grant myself the access actually. I'll just grant myself access. So that's what you need to do if you get any error that says you can actually access the semantic model, or it has been moved, or the location has been changed, any of those errors. That's just what you need to do, grant access. So once you're done doing that, you can go back to Power BI. So now you find out that in Power BI desktop, you only have the report, the model view, the DAX view. You don't have the table view anymore because you are actually connected to the semantic model, so you don't have the table view. Of course, we have one more view. TMDL is not, I didn't enable it here, so it's fine. So here you can go ahead and build your report, right? You go ahead, build your report, do everything you need to do. That's how simple it is. With this, you've actually done the data engineering part, right? Remember, Microsoft Fabric all in one. You've done the data engineering part, transformed your data, cleaned it, modeled your data, and created the Power BI semantic model. Next, you then need to connect. You've connected to the model, right? You want to then create your report. So I'm not participating in the data challenge, right? But I would really love you guys to participate. I believe so much in this data set that I have created, the modifications I have made, and I actually believe that if you spend your time to analyze the data, you'd stand a chance to actually win that data challenge. So I've done something, right? So I'll just show you what I've done. So this is basically what I've done, right? A sample of what I've done. My analysis is actually centered on three things, right? The customers we currently have, right? What are the number of customers we have? Are there new customers? Are we experiencing any growth, right? The segment the customers belong to in terms of income, the customers score segment, right? And the customer's product, this product is subscribed to, right? The sub product category they subscribe to, and the different customers, different locations we have those customers, right? So it's just a simple overview I have, and this is all I wanted for my customers, right? This is all I wanted for my customers. Then of course I have the transaction volume. I wanted my analysis to just follow a flow. The customers, the volume of the transactions, then resolution focus. Resolution focus is basically the errors we're experiencing. So my resolution focus will simply be on the failed transactions and the pending transactions. So like I said, every other thing that was done from this point on was just to create my report. First thing I did was just to come to from Canva setting, right? Background, that's Canva setting. I changed the setting to custom like I always do. So for my custom setting, I'll always use 1080 and I'll always use 1920, right? Just to give me more space for my report, right? So remember, you have your tables here. You have all your tables you're going to be working with here. So you can actually have a count of the customers. Like I said, the first page of my report focused on customers. So what do I need to do next was just to go bring in a background that I've created, right? The Canva background I want to use. Just go to Canva background, browse, then I'm going to select, just go to where I have the background, right? I have it somewhere in my downloads. I've also shared this file with you, the file with the background. I've shared it with you also. So it's actually in the OneDrive, so you don't need to worry about it. You'll find it in OneDrive also. So I'll change it from normal to fit. Then I'll also scroll down, reduce the transparency. So this is the background I actually used. So what's the next thing? What was the first thing I did? Remember, I said all my measures were going to go to this table, right? I'm not going to be writing measures everywhere. My measures are going to be in this table. So I simply right click and say I want to create a new measure. I want to create a new measure and I want to say this measure is my total customers, right? So this is going to be a distinct count. If I'm counting from the fact table, right, it's going to be a distinct count. If I'm counting from the dimension table, I can just use count, but it's all good. Let's say a distinct count, and yeah, we can count from anywhere, which is the count of the customer ID. So, but there are situations where you have to be careful because it's possible you have a customer, right? A registered customer, but the customer is yet to perform a transaction. So there are two things. So in that kind of analysis, you're going to have unique customers. Then you're also going to have number of customers that have performed transaction, unique customers that have performed at least one transaction. So, but now in this case, I'm just going to say a distinct count of the customer ID, right? So like I said, we've gone beyond where we just create reports because we want to create report or we want our report to be beautiful, we want it to be fine. The ID reports, it's supposed to address an issue, provide solution to an issue, right? That's the essence. Um, I'm an advocate of creating a very interesting, interactive, UI-friendly report, right? But I'm also very, very particular about insight. What is the insight your report is communicating? What is the solution? Looking at your report at a glance, what am I going to pick from it? Is it addressing any problem? Is it providing solution to any problem? Those are the things your report should be looking at, not just creating a Power BI report and having fine charts and fine visuals everywhere when insight is not being communicated. So for my report, right, we already have the total customers. I have some measures for the customers. So basically, I'm not going to go over all that, right? I've also shared a sample of the report with you also. So, but I'm just going to address one or two things, which is one of the things you're going to encounter, right? So ideally, when you want to create a a trend, right? Say you want to visualize the total customers by month, right? So when I come and I simply say I want to select a line chart. So one of the things I actually forgot to do was for our calendar table. I said it before, we didn't need all these columns. A lot of them, we actually didn't need some of them, some of the columns. So if we come to model view, let's see if we can do it here. We can actually just turn some off. Can we do it here? We can actually do it here, but if I come back to my semantic model, right? So my workspace, semantic model. So sorry, I come to my workspace. I'll select the semantic model, click and say open data model. So once the data model is open, you're going to find out that you are viewing mode. You are in viewing mode actually. You can't do any changes. You can't make any changes once you are in viewing mode. All you need to do is just come up here, right? Come up here and change it from viewing mode to editing mode, or you can edit in desktop view. So I'll just say editing mode. What I simply want to do was just to, will I say blind? Or just to hide some of the columns I don't need. I know I don't need date offset. or day of set. I don't need day of month. I don't need day of week. I don't need day of week initial. There are a lot of things I know I don't need. Day of week, month, end of quarter, end of end of week, is after today, is business day. A lot of them I don't need. A lot. So all you need to do is be sure of the one you need and the one you don't need, and you can just, let's say, blind them. Just close their eyes that you don't need them. So once, of course, once you're done, you have to refresh, right? I have to go back to my workspace. I have to come to my semantic model. I have to refresh this, right? Preparing, refreshing, refresh my semantic model. Then, of course, if I come back to my Power BI, right, I'm supposed to refresh and I expect it to just take up the change, but it's going to take a while actually. I just wanted to make sure I covered that, right? So, like I said, one of the things I just want to clarify when you are working with your semantic model, one of the issues I had, right, was when I wanted to create a trend, right? I said, okay, I wanted to see my total customers, right? And I went to my calendar table and I wanted to see it by the month name, right? This is the name of the month. So I had something like this. Ideally in Power BI, we'll just go to table view, we'll sort our, what is it called? We'll sort our month name using the month number. We'll sort our month name using the month number. But you can actually see in this case, we don't have a table view to do that. We don't have a table view where we'll go ahead and sort our month name using the month number. So in my own case, what I did to overcome that, I simply created a very simple measure, which is a measure that just sorts for me, which is month initial sort, right? Because I use the initials actually. So it's just the main calendar month of year. So this was just the measure I created, right? So let me just copy this. So this would actually sort any of the months, right? If you're using the month name, you're using the month initial. So I created a measure and I said this measure should sort, right? So I'll just say month sort. I won't say month initial. I'll just say month sort. So for me to be able to use that measure to sort this, to give me from January to December or December to January, I added that month sort to, I added it as a tooltip, right? Then now I can click on the more option here, sort, and I can say sort using month sort, right? So I have it from January to December. I can actually then sort it in ascending order, so I can actually from January to December in this order. So that's one of the issues I encountered, and that's how I just did that. So if, for example, you also need to sort anything, you probably have to then create a measure to sort it, to sort that. So that's basically it. So what I'm going to do next, like I said, the materials are all there. I'm just going to go to the report I created, right? Let me just walk you through everything I did. So I'm looking at my customers, right? And I'm looking at, so this is the measure for my customers, right? We've done that. So I just have a measure that looks at total customers. This is the measure. Then I had another measure here because the data was actually from 2023 to 2025. So I had another measure that looks at the year on year because I want to see growth. Was there an increase in customers from 2023 to 2024 to 2025, like that? So this is the measure that I used in creating my year on year. So there's a slight modification to my year on year because I wanted a situation where if you select a particular year and there's no previous year, you shouldn't have any data, right? And if you don't select any year, you should just get a message that there's no selection as of this moment. So you don't have any data. If you select a year and there's no previous year, you don't have any data. Then if you don't select anything, no selection. So the measure is quite simple. The sample of this measure is actually on the file in the OneDrive. So on the datem query, you see it's actually datem query and year on year measure. It's a very simple measure. It's broken down for you to easily understand without much stress. So it's simply selected here, right? This is selected here. This is looking at the month. So one thing I also took note of, one thing I also wanted to do was, for example, in 2025, we've only gone, okay, this is 2025. We've only gone, this